That afternoon, the sky above the small town where Ellie lived turned unusually dark. Thick, ominous clouds gathered overhead as if preparing for a long, heavy downpour. The wind picked up, whistling through the swaying treetops, creating a mysterious rustling sound. At the Hilltop Elementary School, the final bell rang, and students poured out of their classrooms, crowding under the eaves, laughing and shouting despite the rain that was now coming down in sheets. Among them was a petite girl with a brightly colored owl-shaped backpack. Ellie, a fourth grader known for her gentle nature and, to some, her odd imagination. Unlike her classmates who rushed home as fast as they could, Ellie walked slowly and calmly, protected by a lemon-yellow raincoat she always carried in her bag. She loved the rain. She once told her mother that rain made everything shimmer and feel magical, as if another world was being revealed in the falling drops from the sky. She imagined each raindrop as a tiny spirit, whispering secrets that only a pure heart could hear. Her mother would often chuckle at such things, though deep down, she sometimes worried about her daughter's wildly vivid imagination. The walk from school to home usually took around 15 minutes. But today, the rain was so intense that the road had become a series of rushing streams. Ellie followed her usual path, lined with trees that offered shade in summer and stood bare in winter, crossing a small wooden bridge over a swollen creek and turning down the dirt road that led to the forest behind her house. In the middle of an open field, an abandoned meadow now overgrown with knee-high weeds, she suddenly stopped. A strange feeling crept over her. At first she thought it was just the wind and rain distorting the sounds around her, but when she paused to listen closely, she knew something was off. Amid the steady patter of raindrops, she heard a faint, muffled sound swallowed by the wind, but still clear enough to send chills down her spine. It was a moan. Soft, drawn out, like a stifled cry from someone or something in pain. Ellie swallowed hard. Her hand instinctively tightened around the strap of her backpack as her mind raced through scenes from the books she'd read. A trapped dog? An injured creature? Or perhaps a lost soul crying out for help? She turned, ready to run home and tell her mother. But something, whether curiosity or compassion, made her pause. Ellie took a deep breath, then stepped forward, heading toward the field where the sound had come from. The rain pelted harder, hitting her raincoat like a cascade of pebbles, while her rubber boots sank slightly into the soft, muddy ground. The world around her had gone quiet, save for her heavy breathing and the rain thudding against the trees. She approached a tall clump of grass, carefully parting the dense blades with her hands, eyes wide and unblinking. Her heart pounded, filled with both fear and excitement. And then, at that moment, amid the raindrops sliding from her drenched hair, amid the howling wind sweeping across her back, Ellie saw something she would never forget. There, in a shallow hole partially filled with rainwater, was a filthy, mud-covered creature, trembling as it struggled to lift itself from the sludge. It was a dog, but not an ordinary one. Its belly was swollen, unnaturally large, and its thin body revealed rib bones under the soaked skin. It looked at Ellie with eyes full of pleading and panic, managing a weak moan as if begging for help. Ellie stepped back in shock, but her heart clenched almost immediately. No one could have guessed that this moment, in the rain, in an abandoned field, with a creature hanging between life and death, would mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey. A story far beyond what the brave-hearted fourth-grade girl named Ellie could ever imagine. That fragile whimper seemed to tug Ellie deeper into the empty field, where the wind hissed through the sparse grass and the trees sagged beneath the rain. She stopped, heart thudding wildly, eyes scanning the area where the strange sound had come from. Beneath an old oak tree, in a patch of soil freshly disturbed and dark with moisture, she saw a trembling figure curled in the cold mud. A German shepherd, its eyes glistening with water, filled with pain and desperation. At first, Ellie thought she was seeing things. Most of the dog's body was buried. only its upper half and mud-covered head visible. But as she stepped closer, the horrifying truth became clear. The dog hadn't fallen there. It had been buried alive. Its entire hind body had been covered in earth, and through the thick mud, Ellie could see its belly unnaturally swollen. A thought struck her like lightning. The dog was pregnant. She dropped to her knees without hesitation, not caring that her school uniform was soaked or that her white socks were stained with muck. Her trembling hands started clawing at the heavy dirt clinging to the animal's body. The mud was cold, thick, and seemed to resist her efforts as tried to swallow the already weakened dog. Its breath was faint, head drooping every time it tried to lift itself. Tears mixed with rain rolled down Ellie's cheeks. She dug frantically but gently, trying to free the animal without hurting it. Then her hand struck something hard, a rusted iron shovel, still smeared with wet dirt, as if it had just been used. It lay discarded in the mud, carelessly left behind by whoever had done this. Ellie's entire body shivered. This was no accident. This was deliberate, a crime. She looked around, trying to peer through the heavy curtain of rain. The field was eerily silent, except for the wind and the rain pounding against the leaves. But then she began to notice the signs. Deep boot prints in the mud, leading from the edge of the forest to the dog's shallow grave, then disappearing into the dark, dense trees. The wind howled louder, almost as if urging her to leave. Ellie suddenly remembered the whispers among the parents at last week's school meeting, about a man named Henrik who lived in a decrepit wooden shack near the woods. He used to run a dog breeding operation, but it had been shut down by the authorities after numerous reports of animal abuse. No one dared go near his home, and whenever a dog went missing in town, suspicious eyes would always turn toward his shack. Ellie had never seen him, but the stories about his cold eyes and dry, cruel laugh haunted her. Now, right in front of her, lay the latest victim, a pregnant shepherd, buried alive and left to die in the cold rain, with no hope of survival had Ellie not found her in time. But what broke Ellie's heart most wasn't the cruelty. It was the dog's eyes. They didn't hold anger or blame. They held forgiveness and a fragile glimmer of hope, as if placing all its faith in the little girl standing there. Ellie's chest tightened. She had no phone, no adult with her, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to save this dying creature. But with all the love in her young heart, she knew one thing for sure. She would not abandon it. Then, guided by a child's unwavering instinct, Ellie took a deep breath, brushed the wet hair from her face, gripped the rusted shovel tightly, and began to dig, stroke by stroke, ignoring the rain pouring down and the mud trying to pull her back. The life-or-death rescue had begun. Despite the rain growing heavier by the minute and icy gusts lashing against her face, Ellie didn't stop. The small fourth-grade girl, soaked through and covered in mud, knelt by a waterlogged patch of earth where a life was slipping away unnoticed. Each fading whimper from the buried shepherd tightened something inside her chest. She didn't know why the dog had been so cruelly buried alive, but one thing was crystal clear. If she didn't act now, it wouldn't survive. With her bare, trembling hands, Ellie began to dig. The freezing mud clung to her fingers, numbing them like needles, but she didn't stop. Bit by bit, she scooped away the thick sludge, trying not to hurt the battered body already covered in wounds. The dog's brown eyes watched her, pleading, terrified, yet clinging to a sliver of hope. And in that gaze, Ellie found a strength far beyond her years. Each handful of dirt she clawed away felt like a battle against time, against fate, against the cruelty someone had deliberately inflicted. As she fought through the muck, flashes of memory flickered in her mind. Of a tall man with a worn brown hood, someone she'd glimpsed a few times at dusk near the forest's edge, always dragging a rusted pickup and wearing a hollow, icy stare. Her father had once whispered to her mother about a man named Henrik, former owner of a northern dog breeding farm, shut down after an infamous case of illegal confinement. Rumors swirled about how he vanished after being accused of torturing dogs for profit in unspeakable experiments. No one had been able to catch him. There hadn't been enough proof. Was this what had become of one of his victims? Was this shepherd the last trace of his cruelty? Ellie dug harder, her small frame shaking. Whether from the cold or from the fury now rising in her chest, she couldn't tell. Her heart, still young, already knew what injustice looked like, what cruelty felt like, and what it meant to care. Mud rose to her ankles, her hair clung to her face, but she didn't give in. Then she saw it. A twitch in the dog's belly, the faintest movement. Something was stirring inside. "She's pregnant," Ellie gasped, choking on emotion. In that moment, she realized she wasn't just trying to save one life, but an entire litter of unborn puppies. She leaned in close and whispered to the dog, "Hold on, I'm not leaving you." And as if answering, a flicker of light returned to the dog's eyes, just enough to tell Ellie that her fight wasn't in vain. No one was there to help. No voices cut through the rain. But Ellie, just a fourth-grade girl, was braver than any adult at that moment. She thought of her parents, the warm dinner likely waiting at home. But she couldn't walk away. She couldn't pretend she hadn't seen. That small girl, on a gray and rainy day, was doing something many grown-ups might not have had the courage to do. Summoning the last of her strength, Ellie carefully lifted the dog's hindquarters from the mud, then removed her jacket, wrapping it gently around the injured body. Her heart pounded, not just with fear, but with hope. She hoped that somewhere, someone would believe her. Hope that this creature can still be saved. And she knew exactly where to go. Mrs. Cooper's house, their kind, elderly neighbor who loved animals more than anything. Without hesitation, Ellie wrapped her arms tightly around the dog and took one heavy step after another through the mud. Rain streamed down her cheeks as her small figure disappeared into the storm. But in her chest burned a fire stronger than any thunderstorm. The fire of love, of courage, and of a little girl who chose to do what was right, even though no one had told her she had to. Ellie's arms ached, her small fingers trembling and purple with cold, but she gritted her teeth and held the shepherd tightly to her chest, covered in mud and drenched by the relentless rain. In that moment, nothing mattered more than keeping this fading life warm and safe. Without hesitation, Ellie took off the only coat she had, wrapping it around the soaking body of the dog, gently patting its head and whispering like she was speaking to a friend. "It's okay. I won't let you be alone anymore." The empty field had turned into a chaotic swamp, wind howling through the forest branches like a chorus of distant cries. Ellie lifted her face, rain and tears blurring her vision, but her eyes were filled with resolve. She knew she couldn't do this alone. A sudden thought struck. "Mom." She reached into her backpack, her phone almost slipping from her wet hands. With shaking fingers, she called her mother, her voice breaking between sobs. "Mom, please hurry. There's a dog, she's dying. I need your help." Less than 10 minutes later, her mother's silver car skidded to a stop at the edge of the woods, headlights slicing through the rain and fog. Mrs. Taylor, still wearing her kitchen apron, leapt from the car and ran straight to Ellie, not stopping to ask questions. She scooped the injured dog, still wrapped in Ellie's jacket, into her arms, her face going pale at the sight of the deep scratches on its legs and the grotesquely swollen belly. The dog was clearly in late-stage pregnancy. Without hesitation, she laid the animal gently on a towel-covered back seat, then pulled Ellie into the car with a firm but anxious voice. "Hold on to her tight. We're going straight to the vet." The car sped through the storm, windshield wipers beating a frantic rhythm, tires hissing through puddles. Ellie held the dog close, her hand pressed gently to its chest to feel the faint rise and fall of its breath, silently praying. Every soft whimper from the dog tightened the knot in her throat. Though they had met less than an hour ago, Ellie already felt an unexplainable bond, a deep sense of responsibility for this fragile life in her arms. As they arrived at the clinic, the dull neon sign ahead flickered like the last glimmer of hope. Ellie and her mother jumped out, running through the rain as Ellie shouted, "Help! Please! Someone! Help!" The doors burst open. Dr. Marcus, a middle-aged veterinarian with a background in animal rescue, stood stunned as he saw the bruised, bloated dog. Without wasting a second, he called 2 nurses and rushed the dog to the emergency room, shouting for surgical tools to be prepped immediately. While nurses cleaned and stabilized the animal, Marcus turned to Ellie. She was still shivering, mud clinging to her clothes, her voice shaky as she explained everything. From the eerie moans to the sighting of a man in a brown cap, his eyes cold as steel, who had disappeared into the woods as soon as he noticed her. When she mentioned the name Henrik, carved into a rotting wooden sign near where she found the dog, Marcus froze. Henrik. The name wasn't unfamiliar to him. Years ago, Marcus had tried to expose the man for running a network that abused and trafficked dogs and cats to laboratories. But with no solid evidence, Henrik had walked free and vanished. Now, hearing Ellie's story, the pieces began to fit. A pregnant dog, buried alive, a suspicious man lurking near the forest. The same name resurfaced like a ghost. It couldn't be coincidence. As the dog was wheeled into surgery, Marcus looked at Ellie, just a 4th-grade girl, with a deep sense of admiration. He knew that without her, that life would have been lost forever, left to die in the mud. And now, with the details she'd shared, Marcus knew he couldn't stay quiet. Darkness had returned, and somewhere out there, innocent creatures might still be suffering in silence. But first they had to save the dog, because inside her, other lives were waiting to be born. As Ellie gripped her mother's hand and watched the gurney carrying the shepherd disappear behind the emergency room doors, her heart felt like it might burst from worry. The rain still pounded against the clinic windows, but all outside sounds seemed to vanish, replaced only by the slow, heavy ticking of the clock in the waiting room. Ellie kept her eyes fixed on the door, silently praying as if willing every ounce of her small strength to help keep the dog alive. Her mother, Amelia, held her close, whispering soft reassurances, though the fear in her own heart was impossible to hide. Inside the ER, Dr. Marcus, a man with deep-set eyes and streaks of gray in his hair, worked swiftly with his 2 assistants. Before them lay a fragile life, barely breathing, her body caked in mud and shivering with cold. After a quick examination, Marcus confirmed the dog was in the final stages of pregnancy, severely dehydrated, exhausted, and showing signs of a dangerous infection from being buried in the mud too long. They immediately administered fluids, antibiotics, and gently began cleaning the filth from her swollen belly. The race had begun, not just to save the life of Luna, as Ellie had named her, but also the tiny lives still hidden within her, struggling silently in the dark. In the waiting room, Ellie clung to the foggy window, tears falling down her cheeks before she even realized she was crying. She couldn't sit still. She felt something rare and powerful in that dog, as if they were bound by an invisible thread, as if fate had placed her in that moment for a reason. Though they had only just met, the look in Luna's eyes, full of pain and pleading, had etched itself into Ellie's mind, impossible to forget. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "Please, don't give up. You need me. And I need you." Nearly 2 breathless hours passed before the doors finally opened. Dr. Marcus emerged, peeling off his surgical mask, his face tired but eyes lit with hope. He crouched down to Ellie's level, his voice trembling slightly with emotion as he said, "You saved a true fighter. Not only did Luna survive, all 6 of her puppies were born safely." Ellie stared in disbelief, then burst into tears, sobbing in her mother's arms. Relieved, overwhelmed, and speechless, Dr. Marcus explained that the name Luna, which Ellie had just given her, felt perfect, like the moon that shines through the darkest storm. And so he decided to keep it as a symbol of hope. When she was finally allowed inside, Ellie stepped slowly toward the small bed draped in warm blankets. There lay Luna, breathing faintly but resting in peace, her 6 tiny puppies nestled at her belly. warm and dreaming. Luna opened her eyes, soft and watery, and looked at Ellie as if she remembered the one who saved her. Ellie sat beside her, placing a small hand gently on Luna's back. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. That touch carried a silent promise. You'll never be alone again. But as Dr. Marcus examined the wounds along Luna's hind legs and hips more closely, something chilling came into focus. The scratches and bruises weren't consistent with being buried or struggling. They were deeper, more deliberate. He noticed thin, sharp cuts along her legs, marks that looked more like they came from a wire or a blade. He glanced at Amelia, then leaned in to whisper something that drained the color from her face. This may not have been a simple case of abandonment. This looked like abuse, intentional, possibly brutal. At that very moment, as Ellie smiled softly beside Luna, no one in the room realized that a shadow from the past was quietly stirring. The man once accused of animal cruelty, the one named Henrik, might very well be the one behind Luna's pain. And if that was true, then this was only the beginning of a long journey where Ellie, the brave girl who once followed a whisper in the rain, would soon face truths far darker than the storm she had walked through. Since the day she was rescued, Luna had become an inseparable part of Ellie's life. Every morning before school, Ellie would stroke Luna's thick, warm fur and whisper a soft goodbye. Every afternoon, she would burst through the door, dropping her backpack to the floor just to wrap her arms around her loyal, four-legged friend. The whole family grew to love Luna as one of their own. But it was Ellie, with the sensitive heart of a child who adored animals and an eye for subtle details, who first noticed something strange behind Luna's deep, soulful eyes. Luna wasn't just smart, she was aware. When Ellie dropped something, Luna would quietly pick it up and place it in her hand. When the doorbell rang, Luna wouldn't bark wildly like most dogs. She would calmly walk over and stand at attention by the door, as if awaiting a command. At night, Luna never slept just anywhere. She always chose a spot closest to the window, where she could watch the yard, ears perked, eyes never fully closing. She didn't sleep soundly. She kept watch. One afternoon, while playing in the backyard, Ellie accidentally tapped a video on her tablet. It was a documentary clip of rescue dogs leaping from helicopters to search for survivors after an earthquake. Luna froze. She stood up abruptly, turned to the screen, and began to whimper. Her ears dropped. Her body trembled. Her eyes locked onto the footage as if hypnotized, drawn into some memory from a past that had just been awakened. That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. She quietly pulled out her mother's old notebook, a log of past rescue missions, and flipped through each faded page, hoping to find a clue to explain Luna's strange reaction. Then, tucked in one nearly unreadable entry, she found a note that made her heart race. April, Northwest Rescue Station issued an emergency alert regarding a missing dog. Female shepherd named Luna, IDL 1742, specially trained for search and rescue. Disappeared after being transferred to the private research facility H. Lab for ability enhancement. Never returned. Ellie stared at the line. H. Lab? She whispered, her eyes frozen on the page. She vaguely remembered her mother once mentioning shady research centers disguised as training facilities, places that exploited working dogs under the cover of science, with scandals hushed up by private companies. Could Luna have been one of those victims? The scars along Luna's belly, her hypersensitive reactions to sirens, her flawless execution of commands. It all added up. Ellie remembered the day she pulled Luna from the mud, that panicked look in her eyes, that fragile body still reaching toward the light. Luna wasn't just any stray. She was a soul that had been used, broken, and discarded. From that moment on, Ellie no longer saw Luna as just a pet. She saw her as a life carrying an untold story, a memory that justice had yet to answer for. With her heart full of compassion and resolve, Ellie knew she had to uncover the truth. She couldn't let the one who buried Luna, both in mud and in silence, walk free under the sun. Luna had been saved. But justice for Luna was still waiting for someone brave enough to fight for it. Ellie had made up her mind. She would be that someone. The night Luna suddenly began scratching at the wall and staring up at the ceiling, as if haunted by something invisible, Ellie felt a heavy unease settle in her chest. She lay awake for hours, thoughts swirling with all the strange things that had happened since Luna was rescued. The shepherd's deep, shadowed eyes were sometimes warm and motherly, and other times sharp and alert, like they were holding on to a memory buried so deep it was just waiting to be awakened. Ellie, being a sensitive and introspective girl, couldn't ignore the shift in her companion. The next morning, while walking Luna down the dirt path leading to the forest behind the village, Ellie saw something she'd never noticed before. Under a large oak tree, an old swing creaked gently in the breeze. Sitting silently on it was a boy, around 10 or 11 years old. His name was Noah, a blind boy who lived with his grandmother in a worn wooden cabin at the forest's edge. Known in the village for being quiet and distant, Noah wasn't unfriendly. He simply lived in his world, one without light but filled with emotion and understanding. Luna, walking calmly beside Ellie, suddenly froze. Her body stiffened, ears pricked sharply forward. Then, without warning, she began to step toward Noah. Slowly, cautiously, like she was recognizing something familiar. Noah, though he couldn't see her, smiled gently, turning his head in her direction and whispering, "I knew you'd come back, Guardian." Ellie blinked, startled. Guardian? And how did he know her name? Luna was a name she and her mom had only recently given the dog, and Guardian wasn't something they'd ever said out loud. Noah reached out and placed his hand on Luna's head, not with hesitation or fear, but with the calm certainty of someone greeting an old friend. Then, with a soft, steady voice, he began to speak, not as if he was guessing, but remembering. Luna was part of a program. She was born to protect, to sacrifice, and to endure. But one day she escaped. She ran from that place, from the screaming, from those cold, bright rooms where they attached things to her body, injected her with things that hurt for years. Ellie couldn't breathe. She didn't know if what Noah was saying was real or imagined, but the way Luna looked at him said it all. Her eyes didn't deny a word. She lay down quietly at Noah's feet, as if she'd finally found someone who truly understood the silent storm within her. Noah continued, explaining that in his dreams, he saw what Luna had lived through. Iron chains dragging across floors, machines humming coldly, and voices barking lifeless commands. And somehow he knew he wasn't dreaming randomly. He was receiving something. From Luna. A kind of connection he couldn't explain. Like Luna was trying to pass on her story, piece by piece, through dreams. Ellie didn't know what to believe, but her heart told her that Noah and Luna shared something deep. He wasn't just a new friend. Noah might be the key to unlocking Luna's lost memories and unraveling the secrets buried in her past. In that moment, Ellie made a quiet decision. She would visit Noah often, not just to talk, but to protect both him and Luna. She could feel it in her bones. Whatever was coming, peace was no longer part of their path. What none of them knew was that, deep within the forest, silent figures were watching. And Luna, the long-lost guardian, was about to stir a storm none of them in that quiet village could imagine. Ever since Luna was brought home to Ellie's small house, both she and her friend Noah could sense there was something different about the dog, a kind of intelligence that went beyond instinct, something that felt almost like memory. Luna didn't just follow commands. She seemed to understand things that hadn't even been said. Whenever Ellie was sad, all it took was for her to lower her head, and Luna would gently place a paw on her hand, those sorrowful brown eyes gazing deep into her soul, as if trying to comfort her. But it was on one fateful afternoon, under the pale sunlight filtering through the backyard canopy, that Ellie made a discovery that sent her heart racing. While brushing Luna's fur around her neck, Noticing a slight clumping, Ellie felt a strange bump under the skin. In the slanting light, she carefully parted the fur and uncovered an almost invisible barcode, laser-etched into the skin, hidden so deeply it would have gone unnoticed without close inspection. In that moment, everything around her seemed to freeze. This wasn't something any ordinary dog would have. Certainly not a mark from a typical breeding facility. Stunned, Ellie called Noah over. Though he couldn't see it, he gently ran his fingers over Luna's neck, his heightened sense of touch tracing every contour. The moment his fingers found the barcode, he paused, his brows furrowing as if a memory surfaced from somewhere deep and unconscious. "They used to do this to animals in experimental programs," Noah whispered, his voice dropping lower than usual. Ellie, trembling, asked, "Who are they?" And from Noah's tightly sealed lips came a name Ellie had never heard before: Genix, a secret organization known for conducting experimental research on animals, driven by an ambition to create biological guardians for military and population control purposes. Noah revealed that he had once heard Luna in a recurring dream, always the same vision of a dog fighting in a cold, sterile white room, injected with substances, controlled through a device on its head, and eventually discarded like a broken machine. Ellie couldn't believe what she was hearing. But one look into Luna's eyes, layered with memories and pain, told her this wasn't a fantasy. No one could invent such vivid fear without a deep, unseen connection. Determined not to let their questions go unanswered, Ellie and Noah snuck into the town library to dig for information. In an old scientific journal, they found a faded printed article that had once been removed from the internet. Genix, the hidden truth behind forbidden neurobiological experiments. The article revealed that shepherd dogs like Luna were chosen for their intelligence and loyalty, implanted with chips to control behavior, and even trained to detect threats and protect their targets, their owners, at any cost. These were biological bodyguards capable of feeling emotion, understanding brainwave-based commands, yet subjected to relentless injections and inhumane testing. Then came a final line in the article that left both of them speechless. In 2017, a group of shepherd dogs was released into the wild after the program was abruptly shut down. No one knows whether they survived or were quietly eliminated. Ellie suddenly remembered how Luna had been found buried in mud, not as if someone wanted her dead, but as if they wanted her to disappear. A death without a body. That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. She curled up in bed while Luna lay beside her, ears perked in an unusually alert state. Every creak of the window, every rustle of dry leaves outside made her jump. In Ellie's mind, Luna was no longer just the soaked dog rescued from the mud, but a being engineered as a weapon, carrying memories of pain, loss, and perhaps a mission left unfinished. And if Luna truly was a guardian, the far more terrifying question still hung in the air. Guarding whom? Against what? And whatever is it getting closer? Ever since Ellie discovered the barcode beneath Luna's fur, she hadn't been able to stop thinking about where the shepherd truly came from. Luna's behavior, instincts, even her eyes, were far beyond those of a normal dog. Day by day, she showed an uncanny level of sensitivity, as if she could read Ellie's thoughts before they were spoken. She never barked without reason, stayed on alert whenever strangers approached the house, and often crawled under the table whenever a helicopter flew over the woods behind their home, as if sounds could trigger something buried deep inside her memory. Noah, the blind boy with a spiritual connection to animals, felt increasingly linked to Luna. One day, as he placed his hand gently on her head, he suddenly gasped and whispered, "Luna remembers. She hasn't forgotten what they did to her. There's a place, bright white lights, wires, the screams of other animals." His cryptic words sent chills through Ellie. She didn't dare tell her mother, who had already begun to worry about keeping Luna. It wasn't fear of dogs that troubled her, but a sense that something unseen was closing in on their family, a shadow lurking behind the mist after the rain. Then came that night. It was pitch dark. The evening rain had left behind the damp, earthy scent of wet soil clinging to the roof. Water dripped steadily from the eaves. Ellie's mother was cleaning up the kitchen when the doorbell rang. No one could have predicted that cold, lingering chime would mark the beginning of a nightmare. She opened the door just a crack, and was hit by the smell of damp raincoats and old wood smoke. A tall man stood outside, dressed in a black coat that covered him from neck to foot, with a glossy cap pulled low to hide most of his face. In the dim porch light, only his eyes were visible, cold, sharp, and utterly devoid of feeling. Without greeting or introduction, he spoke in a gravelly voice. "I'm here for the dog. You should tell your daughter to stop. She's going too far, and it won't be safe if she keeps holding on to it. The ones before her tried, and they disappeared. Don't let your family be next." She froze. An icy dread spread down her spine. This wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. But before she could ask anything, the man turned and disappeared into the night, leaving deep footprints in the soaked earth. Ellie, unable to sleep, had seen everything from behind the living room curtain. Her fists clenched so tightly her nails drew blood. Rage and fear surged through her. Someone knew who Luna was, and they were ready to do whatever it took to reclaim her, no matter the cost. The next day, everything in the house felt different. Her mother forbade opening windows at night, checked the locks constantly, and kept her phone close at all times. But all the precautions seemed pointless. Just 3 days later, Ellie discovered the back gate's lock had been snapped. Nothing was stolen, but lying on the doorstep was a blank card. No sender, just a scrawled message. Final warning. Ellie stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She grabbed the card and rushed inside, holding it out for Luna to sniff. The dog growled low, her fur bristling, then bolted to the door, barking furiously toward the woods, as if she'd caught the scent of whoever had left the message. And that night, Luna disappeared. The kennel door was wide open, but every lock was still in place. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints leading away. Noah, after running his fingers through a tuft of fur left behind, said with quiet despair, "Someone called her, in a way we don't understand." Ellie collapsed to the ground, sobbing, the grief like losing a family member. But in her eyes burned a defiant light. "I won't let them take Luna. Even if I have to walk into the darkest place, I will find the truth." Ever since the chilling warning from the man in the black cap, the air inside Ellie's small house had grown heavy with worry and suspicion. Her mother locked every door tightly each night, activated motion sensor lights around the yard, while Ellie herself could no longer sleep soundly. She often jolted awake in the middle of the night, haunted by a feeling that something or someone was watching from behind the gently swaying curtains. But tonight, those instincts were no longer just fear or imagination. At 2 a.m., when everything seemed to be resting in silence, a soft click echoed from the kitchen window at the back of the house. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to rouse Luna from where she lay beside Ellie's bed. The dog sprang up in an instant and moved silently into the hallway, body tense with alertness. Ellie, stirred by Luna's instinct as if connected by some invisible thread, followed quietly, her heartbeat pounding in her chest. From the stairwell she caught a faint green glow gliding across the backyard, light from a strange device. The intruder the man had warned them about had arrived. The kitchen window slid open without a sound. A tall, shadowy figure slipped inside, moving like he knew every corner of the house. On his shoulder was a bag full of gleaming tools, and in his hand, a slim silver syringe that caught the light like a blade. But the most terrifying thing wasn't his gear. It was the small symbol on his collar, a circle split by a red lightning bolt, the same as the one etched into Luna's barcode. Ellie froze, instinctively about to scream for her mother, when Luna launched forward like a bolt of lightning, barking with such force that the intruder staggered back. He swung his arm, ready to strike, but Luna tackled him to the floor, sinking her teeth into his shoulder, knocking the tool bag from his grip. A small knife skittered across the tile, glinting under the kitchen light that had just flicked on. Ellie's mother rushed downstairs, panic on her face, but quickly grabbed the phone and called 911, while Luna pinned the man against the wall, growling with relentless fury. The attacker lashed out with a sudden kick, knocking Luna backward and leaving her limping with a bleeding front leg. But instead of retreating, Luna placed herself between Ellie and the intruder, growling low, her eyes no longer those of a dog but of a warrior defending someone she loved. Beaten and cornered, the man knew the mission had failed. He fled through the back door, abandoning his equipment. But just before disappearing into the night, he turned and looked directly at Ellie, his voice a spine-chilling whisper. "We'll come back not just for her, but for the girl." By the time the police arrived, all that remained were muddy footprints, a knife, a bag of syringes filled with unknown liquid, and a trail of blood leading into the woods. But the evidence led nowhere. No fingerprints, no digital traces, nothing that matched any national database. It was as if he didn't exist. As for Luna, wounded but loyal, she stayed by Ellie's side the entire night, ears perked even as her eyes shut in exhaustion. Ellie wrapped her arms around Luna's warm, blood-streaked body, tears spilling onto her fur. She knew in that moment everything had changed. This was no longer about a lost dog. This was a war. What had seemed like just a terrifying nightmare faded into morning light, but the dread in Ellie's chest didn't disappear. It grew heavier, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. She couldn't take her eyes off Luna, who lay still by the window, appearing to sleep, though her ears stood alert. And even with her eyes closed, she seemed to sense everything around her. The feeling that Luna was more than just an ordinary dog was becoming undeniable, especially after the way she single-handedly fought off the intruder with a precision and resolve that Ellie had never seen in any animal. Ellie's mother, still shaken by the black-capped man's threat, had secretly called her brother, a former military security engineer. He sent over a microchip scanner with one warning. "If you find anything unusual, don't go to the police. Some secrets are never meant to see daylight." When Ellie held the scanner over Luna's neck, a sharp beep rang out, and the code that appeared on the screen left both mother and daughter frozen in shock. GU7B/Cerberus, active unit/mind link enabled. As if guided by instinct, Ellie began inspecting the rusted metal collar Luna always wore. Inside it, she found a tiny embedded microchip and a series of laser-etched symbols, along with a Latin phrase printed in bold, Canis Custos, Vitae aut Mortis, gatekeeper dog, of life or death. Luna wasn't created by accident. She was designed for something far bigger, something that reached far beyond what a fourth grader could comprehend. Noah, through his dreams and strange spiritual connection, began to see Luna's memories with growing clarity. One afternoon, while they played with a litter of puppies in the backyard, he froze mid-laugh, gently placing his hand on Luna's head and whispering, "There are so many eyes watching through glass rooms, through cameras from inside Luna's mind. She wasn't made to live. She was made to kill." The words sent a chill through Ellie's bones, but they also confirmed what she was beginning to understand. Luna wasn't just a victim. She was living proof of an unethical experiment someone was desperately trying to erase. That night, as Ellie searched for more answers, a strange file automatically opened on her mother's old laptop. No sender, no warning. It was a video, apparently from inside a massive lab facility. German shepherds were shown with neural implants in their skulls, locked in combat training chambers, subjected to brutal simulations of battlefield scenarios. In one clip, they were commanded to hunt down targets with terrifying speed and obedience. A middle-aged man in dark sunglasses and a white lab coat looked straight into the camera and spoke coldly. "Project Cerberus has reached combat phase level 2. Subject GU7B has exceeded performance metrics, but shows emotional instability. Recommend termination." Ellie's breath caught. GU7B was Luna, and it was the last surviving prototype. At dawn the next morning, just as Ellie was preparing for school, an unmarked black van parked roughly 200 meters from her house. A man in dark glasses stepped out without a word, leaving a small box with a screen at the front gate. When Ellie's mother opened the door, the screen lit up on its own and played an audio message in a calm but forceful male voice. Cerberus requests the return of subject GU-7B. Deadline: 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in consequences beyond your family. That night, Ellie held Luna tightly, her tears soaking into the blood-matted fur at the dog's neck. She was no longer just a little girl who loved animals. She was now caught in the middle of an invisible war, and somehow, she was part of it. She knew that if she let go, Luna might be dragged back into a life of obedience and control. But if she held on, her family could be swallowed by something far darker than she'd ever imagined. Yet in Luna's eyes, as she looked up at Ellie under the quiet moonlight, there was no fear, no bitterness, only trust. A gaze that seemed to say, "Whatever happens, I won't let them hurt you." The chaos of the night before, when their small home was broken into and Luna had bravely defended them, left a deeper, more ominous fear hanging over the household. Ellie's mother, usually calm and composed, could no longer hide her anxiety. She insisted Ellie stay away from anything involving Luna. But Ellie, with the heart of a child both brave and full of love, couldn't turn her back on the creature she had once pulled from the mud, who had now saved her entire family. Together with Noah and Dr. Nash, the kind-hearted veterinarian who had once saved Luna's life, Ellie decided they had to uncover the full truth. Dr. Nash, who had previously worked in a lab focused on bioencoding, mentioned that if Luna did have a chip inside her, they might be able to decode it using an old piece of equipment in his storage room. On a rainy afternoon, the three of them quietly entered a forgotten basement behind the clinic, crammed with dusty biomedical gear, brainwave scanners, and abandoned genetic maps. After hours of tense work and trial runs, one of the old machines let out a sharp beep. The screen flickered to life, and line by line, encrypted files began to appear. Ellie gripped Noah's hand tightly, her eyes fixed on the strange symbols. One file stood out with an ominous name: Moonlight Prototype GU-7B. With hearts pounding, they opened it and watched a video recorded inside a sterile white lab where dozens of dogs like Luna floated in glass tanks filled with glowing blue fluid. A cold voice narrated, "Project Moonlight, an advancement in military biotechnology. Instead of building weapons, we create guardians." One by one, dense documents filled the screen, detailing a disturbing process: how Cerberus had manipulated the genes of shepherd dogs to upgrade their nervous systems, enhance reflexes, increase endurance, and, most disturbing, synchronize their minds with a compatible human subject. These guardians were never meant to live like real animals. They were engineered tools of war, trained for obedience. Luna, codename GU-7B, was one of the final prototypes. But unlike the others, she developed compassion, made her own choices, and refused to harm humans. The final report stamped in red warned, "GU-7B shows signs of deviation from core programming. Possible formation of independent consciousness. A termination order was issued. All staff are strictly forbidden from further contact." Ellie couldn't believe what she was seeing. She turned to Luna, who now lay peacefully with her head resting on Ellie's legs, like any gentle family dog. No one would ever suspect this creature had once been part of a military cloning project, once labeled a system error, simply because she learned how to love. Noah, with his unique spiritual sensitivity, seemed to sense something deeper. He whispered, "I think Luna and I met before. Somewhere else. When I was little." He pointed to a clip pulled from the chip. A blind boy sitting in a sterile white room, his hand resting gently on the head of a dog identical to Luna. He said nothing, but his face was radiant. The moment stunned Dr. Nash. His breath caught as he realized the boy in the video was Noah. Noah may have once been part of the project. He could have been one of the Lynx, the children chosen to test mental synchronization with bioengineered creatures. It would explain everything. Why Noah always understood Luna, why their bond ran so deep, as if two souls shared a silent language. It also meant Noah was now in Cerberus's sights, too. Luna was no longer just a dog. And Ellie, a fourth-grade girl with an unshakable heart, had unknowingly become the keeper of a secret someone in the shadows was desperate to bury. But armed with trust, love, and friendship, Ellie refused to back down. She looked at Luna, tears welling in her eyes, and whispered, "If everything they said is true, then that just means I have to protect you even more. You're not a mistake. You're a miracle." Just as Ellie, Noah, and Dr. Nash are trying to figure out how to protect Luna and dig deeper into the secrets behind Project Moonlight, the real storm hit. Not from the sky, but from those cloaked in the authority of science and power. One early weekend morning, the quiet town where Ellie lived was shaken by an emergency broadcast that flashed across every news channel and social media feed. A lab-engineered animal named Luna has escaped from Cerberus Biotech Research Center, potentially dangerous to humans. The message was delivered with a grave tone, underscored by urgent cinematic music, like a biological disaster was unfolding. Images of Luna were shown on repeat, but not the gentle, intelligent eyes Ellie knew. Instead, they had edited and amplified a frame of Luna growling during an attack to make her appear savage, wild. Cerberus declared her a failed experiment, a creature that had slipped beyond control, one that had previously attacked humans and might now be spreading an unidentified virus. Even animal lovers began to waver. Online community groups shared Luna's image at lightning speed, along with panicked comments. Families living near Ellie's house drew their curtains and stopped speaking to her family. Some of Ellie's classmates whispered that she was harboring a monster, leaving her more isolated than ever among the people she once trusted. Cerberus then offered a $50,000 reward for any information leading to Luna's retrieval. It was a tempting trap, more than enough to stir up greed and shake the trust of the town. Soon, unfamiliar faces began appearing in the neighborhood, people dressed like health workers, carrying scanners, and pretending to inspect electrical systems as they quietly tried to access private homes. One evening, Ellie saw from her bedroom window a gray van parked silently at the end of the street, headlights off. She felt it. Someone was watching. Luna did too. The shepherd was constantly alert, ears perked, eyes locked on the slightest movements outside. Noah, with his uncanny senses and spiritual connection to Luna, whispered to Ellie that Luna had entered protection mode. The second storm had arrived. Dr. Nash, who had been secretly helping the children, received an anonymous warning letter, threatening to revoke his license if he continued interfering with Cerberus's affairs. But he didn't back down. After analyzing the chip embedded in Luna, he discovered what Cerberus was hiding: a secret, unregulated cloning and animal training program for military use, completely outside the oversight of any authority. As the world turned its back, only Ellie, Noah, and Luna had each other. The three, fragile yet determined, chose to disappear into silence, preparing for a journey none of them could predict. But Ellie knew one thing with certainty: Luna wasn't a monster. She was a victim. And if Ellie didn't speak up, if she didn't fight to bring the truth into the light, then the villains would keep rewriting justice with lies and fear. And so that night, three small figures slipped through the trails behind the forest, where the first rain had fallen on the day they met, beginning their escape. Night fell quickly, heavy like a thick black blanket smothering every possible escape route. After the town was plastered with wanted posters, false reports, and suspicious stares from neighbors and former friends, Ellie's mother held her daughter tightly, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "You have to go. Now trust Luna, and trust your heart." And so Ellie left in silence, leading Noah, the blind boy who somehow saw more than anyone else, and Luna, the shepherd who had once clawed her way out of a muddy grave, now once again facing danger of a different kind. They slipped away from the small house on the forest's edge, with nothing but a backpack carrying a few pieces of dry bread, a weak flashlight, and a torn map page from Ellie's father's old notebook. The same father who'd mysteriously disappeared 3 years ago during a mission no one dared to speak of. Their footsteps blended with the forest rain, whispering through the trees like the breath of the night itself. The woods behind the town, once a playground for Ellie, now loomed like a black maze, where every blade of grass, every swaying branch might be hiding unseen eyes. Every snap of a twig, every gust of wind through the leaves made her heart race. And in the distance, flickering lights, maybe search drones, maybe a forest ranger's flashlight or something far worse, Cerberus was no longer lurking in the shadows. The organization now operated in plain sight, using local police and nameless agents, armed with cutting-edge tech, bioscanners, and chip-tracked hounds. They had labeled Luna as a Level 1 biohazard, a rogue unit capable of leaking military secrets, or worse, threatening national security. But Ellie knew the truth. Luna wasn't dangerous. Luna was a victim. When the first drone passed overhead, Ellie threw Noah down beneath a hollow tree and covered them both with her raincoat. Luna, without a command, vanished into the air, then struck with ghost-like precision, leaping high and shredding the drone before it could signal. Ellie, hands trembling, dragged the broken remains into the brush. Luna let out a soft whimper, almost like an apology for scaring her. They pushed deeper into the forest, following paths nearly swallowed by nature. Noah, with his strange sixth sense, suddenly stopped, placing a hand on the bark of an old tree. "We're surrounded," he murmured. "But Luna's leading us. She remembers this place." Ellie gripped his hand tighter. Her trust in Luna had never felt stronger. Before long, they reached an old stone cave, once a campsite used by Ellie's father. Luna began pawing at the ground, digging beneath a cluster of loose rocks, until she uncovered a hidden compartment. Inside was an old memory card, etched with the words, "Moonlight, Prototype 03. Ellie and Noah locked eyes in the darkness. No words were needed. Every suspicion they had was now undeniable. But time was running out. In the distance, the low rumble of engines echoed through the forest. Military trucks were approaching. The sky lit up with thermal scanner beams from aerial drones slicing through the night. The little fourth-grade girl was no longer just a child. Ellie now knew. If she and Luna wanted to survive, if they were going to expose the truth, if they hoped to protect others like Luna, then she had no room left for fear. And so, under the pitch-black canopy of the woods, 3 small figures set off once more. The escape of the hunted had begun, but inside them burned the kind of courage no weapon could defeat. Dim light filtered through the thick canopy above, casting eerie shadows over the forest floor, as if Ellie, Noah, and Luna had stepped into another world entirely. After barely escaping a ruthless chase by Cerberus, they were now forced to hide deep within the wilderness, a place where even the smallest sound could jolt their nerves, where time itself seemed to move more slowly, cautiously. They wandered past shallow creeks, climbed over rotting tree trunks, and wove through tangled roots that stretched like webs. Luna led the way with razor-sharp instincts, occasionally stopping to sniff the air, head raised, as if searching for something familiar. One misty afternoon, as light rain began to fall and fog spilled across the small valleys, Luna suddenly halted at a sunken patch of ground, surrounded by fallen, moss-covered trees. At first, Ellie thought Luna had simply caught the scent of a wild animal, but as she and Noah moved closer, they heard it. A faint, stifled whimper, weak but unmistakable, like pain held in the throat. They pushed aside a thicket of brush and froze. Lying in the dirt was a battered creature, soaked to the bone, its fur matted with mud and blood. One leg was badly injured, the dried wound still clinging to old, crusted blood. It was a male Malinois, larger and more muscular than Luna, though now utterly spent and broken. Strangely, Luna showed no signs of aggression. Instead, she stepped forward gently and let out a soft whine, something between a call and a memory. The dog opened its eyes, piercing yellow, sharp like steel, flickering first with alarm, then softening as they locked eyes with Luna. No words were needed. The two recognized each other, soul to soul. Noah reached out, placing a hand lightly on the dog's back, closing his eyes as if tuning in to something unseen. Then, with a voice far more serious than usual, he whispered to Ellie, "His name is Blaze. He was part of Project Moonlight 2 Guardian Unit 02. Ellie's breath caught. Her hands trembled as she pushed back the soaked fur. And there it was. A faint barcode, barely visible now, marked ML02. Suddenly, everything was clearer than ever before. Luna wasn't the only one. There could be others like her, scattered, hiding, or already gone. Blaze trembled, dazed and disoriented, but Ellie knelt down and gently wiped away the blood with a wet cloth, feeding him the last of their crumbled biscuits. Luna licked his wound, like an older sister reunited with a long-lost brother, while Noah sat silently beside them, his hand resting on their backs, as if listening to a sorrowful song buried in locked-away memories. That night, they built a small fire. The flames flickered against the shadows, casting light over a strange and fragile scene. A brave elementary school girl, a blind boy with an otherworldly gift, and two former warriors, once weapons, now simply trying to survive, huddled together like a makeshift family. Blaze, though still weak, began to stand. He limped, but every shaky step was filled with purpose. Each one said, "I'm back, and I won't let anyone hurt my family again." But elsewhere, far from their hidden camp, deep inside an underground control room at Cerberus's temporary headquarters, a satellite screen lit up. It had detected a strange heat signature in the western woods. On the monitor, two moving figures appeared, side by side. Dr. Thomas Lang, seated at the head of the operations table, let out a crooked smile. He clenched a metal pen tightly in his fist and gave a cold command. "They've reunited. Initiate Phase 2. Issue a red alert to the extraction hunt team. Retrieval is no longer necessary. Terminate on sight." Ellie didn't hear the order, but she felt it. Something in the air had changed. She turned to Luna, watching her ears perk up, eyes fixed toward a distant, unseen force, like sensing a storm approaching. But now, they weren't alone. They had two guardians, and this time, they were ready to fight. As the last light of day was swallowed by the thick forest shadows, the group, Ellie, Noah, Luna, and Blaze, moved quietly along a winding path deep in the woods. The scattered patter of rain against the leaves blended with the steady breathing of Blaze, who had slowly regained some strength after weeks of surviving alone. Though still limping, he pushed himself to keep up, never taking his eyes off Luna, his sister in fate. Ellie began to notice something strange. The forest, once quietly alive, now felt too silent, like it had gone still out of fear. No bird song, no wind rustling through branches, just her heartbeat thudding in her chest like a warning drum. Her hand gripped the small rope looped around Blaze's neck, her eyes fixed on Luna's cautious steps ahead, sensing something was wrong. And then it happened. Swift and brutal. A sharp snap rang out, followed by a piercing yelp from Blaze that froze Ellie in place. She spun around just in time to see him caught in a heavy steel trap, its rusted jaws clamped viciously around his hind leg. Blood trickled down in dark rivulets, soaking into the dry leaves below. Blaze thrashed, but the more he struggled, the deeper the wound tore. His cries tore through the forest, and through Ellie's heart. Without hesitation, she dropped to her knees beside him, clawing at the trap's metal teeth despite the sharp edges slicing her palms. Noah rushed over but stood frozen in shock, eyes wide with dread. "This isn't a normal trap," he stammered. "It's tactical. Cerberus used these to catch escapees." Suddenly, a deep sound emerged from the underbrush, the crunch of boots on roots, the metallic clink of gear being readied. They held their breath. 3 figures appeared, clad in matte black uniforms, faces hidden behind masks, infrared goggles gleaming in the dark. On their shoulders, the unmistakable emblem of a 3-headed dog, the mark of Cerberus. One of them spoke, his voice low and mocking. "You thought the forest was a safe place? That girl, that dog, they're our property. Hand them over, and maybe we'll go easy on the rest of you." A chill swept through Ellie. She threw her body protectively over Blaze, staring defiantly at the masked man. Luna stepped forward, slowly, growling low and long, her stance rigid, ready to strike. But before she could leap, one of the attackers pressed a button on a handheld device. A jarring electronic buzz filled the air, and Blaze screamed. His body convulsed violently. Ellie realized with horror. The trap wasn't just mechanical. It was wired with an electric shock mechanism. Blaze was being tortured from the inside. "Stop!" Ellie screamed. "Please, I'm begging you! Blaze is not some object you can treat like this!" But her plea was met with silence, and then the cock of a tranquilizer gun, aimed straight at her. In a blur of motion, Luna launched forward like a shadow in flight. She hit the gunman with full force, knocking the weapon from his grip, then turned instantly to tackle a second soldier before they could react. The attackers stumbled, thrown into chaos. At that moment, Ellie seizes her chance. Grabbing a rock, she slammed it down on the trap's locking mechanism. It shrieked in protest, but finally snapped open, freeing Blaze from its cruel grip. He was still bleeding, but he stood, unsteady but defiant. His eyes locked on Ellie's, no longer filled with pain but with unshakable gratitude and a silent vow of loyalty. "Run!" Noah shouted, spotting beams of flashlights approaching. Cerberus reinforcements were closing in. And so, under the freezing rain of the forest, a small group, a brave schoolgirl, a blind boy, and 2 4-legged warriors, ran once more into the night, vanishing into the trees. Behind them lay broken branches, scattered weapons, and 3 fallen agents of Cerberus. A brutal reminder that even the cruelest technology can be undone by the strength of courage and love. Their escape through the deep forest left wounds that went far beyond the physical. For Ellie, just 10 years old, the trauma carved into her heart ran deeper than any cut. She had witnessed the kind of cruelty that shouldn't exist outside stories, coming from a secret organization she'd never even heard of until now. As Blaze lay panting, collapsed on a bed of dry leaves with blood still seeping from his injury, Ellie pressed a trembling hand against the wound with a thin raincoat, trying to stop the bleeding, just like she had with Luna on that fateful rainy day. Luna stood guard, body tense like a programmed sentinel, eyes fixed on the distant rustle of shifting brush. Beside her, Noah gently ran his hand along Blaze's neck, as if channeling some quiet, invisible form of reassurance. Then, in that moment of frozen time, a faint snap broke the silence, a twig cracking underfoot. Luna instantly moved in front of Ellie, letting out a low growl. Ellie held her breath, wrapping her arms protectively around Blaze as if it might be the last time she'd get to touch him. But instead of a threat, a woman stepped out from the mist. She wore a long black coat, sharp, hawk-like eyes, and pinned to her chest was a badge that caught the light of the rising sun. FBI. Her hands were raised, no weapon in sight, and her voice was firm but calm. "Don't be afraid. I'm here to help." Luna didn't attack. That alone stunned Ellie. Luna had never let a stranger get this close without warning. The woman knelt slowly, meeting Ellie's wide, frightened eyes with quiet steadiness. "I'm Agent Olivia Hale. I've been tracking the Cerberus organization for the past 3 years, she said, pulling a small scanner from her pocket. "I believe this dog, Luna, is the missing link in my investigation. And you're the most important part of all." Before Ellie could respond, the scanner let out a familiar click. A green light swept over Luna's neck, and a line of text appeared. "Moonlight, Prototype 07, Enhanced Sentinel." Olivia exhaled slowly, murmuring, Finally, Cerberus isn't just a research facility, she continued. They're part of a covert network. They clone and train animals to become living weapons. We lost track of 2 prototypes after a mysterious transport explosion. I always believed at least one survived, and then I read the story of a young girl who risked her life to save a dog buried alive. I knew I had to find you. Noah stepped forward, resting his hand on Luna's back. I've heard her voice before, he said softly. Not words exactly, but feelings, messages. Luna isn't just programmed. She has a soul. Olivia paused, then nodded slowly. That's what terrifies them. Cerberus wants control over everything, but a being that can think, feel, and choose for itself. That's beyond their reach. She unzipped her backpack and pulled out a marked map. A red circle was drawn deep in a nature reserve, Cerberus' final stronghold. If you're ready, she said, we can bring down Project Moonlight. But only if you choose to. Ellie, the decision is yours. Ellie looked around. At Blaze, struggling but determined to rise at Luna, watching her with absolute trust, and at Noah, the only one who could truly understand the things no one else could see. She took a deep breath, then placed her hand gently on Luna's head. I won't let anyone hurt her again. Not even an entire secret organization. Olivia gave a faint smile. For the first time in 3 years of chasing shadows, she felt a true light breaking through, sparked by a small girl with a heart braver than anyone she had ever known. The conversation between Ellie and Agent Olivia seemed to awaken something in the agent, a flicker of hope that had long gone cold. Olivia had spent 3 years tracking Cerberus, witnessing disappearances that were never explained, experimental animals that never came back, and witnesses silenced permanently. But never, not once, had she seen anyone, child or adult, stand up like Ellie did. A 4th-grade girl, small and fragile in the eye of a massive conspiracy, yet willing to go to the end of the road to protect a life. That very night, a small task force was assembled in secret. Led by Olivia, it included 2 high-tech agents and Dr. Henry, the veterinarian who had treated Luna and understood her genetic structure better than anyone. They didn't bring heavy weapons, but something far more important: hidden maps, biological data extracted from Luna's chip, thermal scanners, and encryption-breaking tools, everything they needed to reach the darkest heart of Cerberus, an underground facility deep in the forest, erased from official records and hidden behind an artificial waterfall. Before they left, Ellie scribbled a quick letter for her mother in case she didn't make it back. I'm not afraid anymore, Mom. Luna needs me, and I believe there are more like her still trapped somewhere. I won't let them be forgotten. Noah, silent as always, held her hand tightly. Though blind, he somehow always saw the things others couldn't. Like courage, like loyalty, like the pain that no one ever spoke out loud. The mission began at midnight. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the distant murmur of insects and the soft crunch of footsteps on fallen leaves. Luna led the way, her sharp nose following a chemical scent she had known since the days she was locked away. It took nearly 3 hours to reach the cliff face, overgrown with vines, where Luna suddenly stopped. She let out a low growl, then scratched at the rock with her claws. A narrow steel door creaked open beneath the brush, the hidden entrance to the facility Cerberus had once used. Inside, time had frozen. Dust-covered metal cages sat abandoned. In the corners, the curled remains of dogs, reduced to brittle bones. Scribbled across the walls were frantic, broken messages. One read, "I'm not a monster." Olivia shivered. Ellie felt a chill run down her spine like ice. They moved deeper into the heart of the compound and reached the control room. Most of the equipment was wrecked, but Henry, using his years of biotech expertise, managed to recover fragments of data from a locked black drive. And in those lines of resurrected code, the truth came into focus. Project Moonlight wasn't just about creating elite canine soldiers, it was also experimenting with artificial memory implants, programming absolute loyalty to the first human the subjects saw after awakening. But Luna was different. Her programming had failed to overwrite her core. She had kept her heart, and that's why she'd been discarded like trash. The final recovered file was an audio log from Dr. Thomas Lang, the highest-ranking official in Cerberus. His voice was clear, confident, and chilling. "We created creatures stronger than wolves, more loyal than humans, and now we're afraid of what we made? Erase it all. Leave nothing behind." Ellie stood frozen. She didn't cry, but the look in her eyes, once that of a child, now carried the weight of someone far older. She turned to Luna, gently resting a hand on her head, and whispered, "We're going to tell your story. All of it." But just as the group prepared to retreat, a strange growl echoed from the lowest level of the bunker, followed by the harsh scrape of claws against metal. It wasn't Luna, it wasn't Blaze, it was something else, something different. A failed creation of Project Moonlight, a living ghost left buried beneath the earth for far too long. Under the flickering lights of the underground data control room, once the nerve center of Cerberus, Henry, the young tech agent aligned with the FBI, finally cracked the deepest level of encryption on the hard drive. As white lines of code began to appear on the black screen, everyone, Olivia, Ellie, Noah, Dr. Clark, and Luna, fell silent. The file was titled, Moonlight Alpha 01 Luna, Top Secret Documentation on a Previously Undisclosed Subproject. Within it, a series of documents, video recordings, and clinical reports slowly revealed a staggering truth. Luna was not just an experimental subject. She was the first and only prototype to fully develop human-like intelligence, emotion, and self-awareness. The first video showed Luna as a pup, locked in a glass room, watching footage of human interactions. Researchers recorded how she responded to the sound of a crying child, her ears drooping, eyes hollow with empathy. They played classical music and were stunned to see an emotional activity spike in the relevant regions of her brain. In another clip, Luna used her snout to push her food tray toward a neighboring cage where a lab mouse lay starving, an action marked as exhibiting altruistic behavior. But then came a note in one of the internal reports that left the entire team breathless. Alpha 01 has formed an attachment to low-level personnel. Child subject named Ellie. 1-month empathy trial. Olivia turned to Ellie, stunned. "Ellie, is that you?" The girl shook her head slowly, but in her heart a flicker of memory stirred. Being taken on a childhood tour of a science facility, where she'd played briefly with a gentle, ash-gray puppy with kind, unforgettable eyes. She never knew until now that the pup had been Luna, and that memory had never faded for either of them. As they continued to scan the files, they uncovered audio recordings of conversations between high-ranking project officials discussing how Luna had become a moral threat to the entire operation. Her emotions were affecting the behavior of other prototypes. One scientist had strongly opposed her termination, arguing that Luna was a breakthrough in both biology and ethics. He was fired the next day. Then came the final video. Luna, sedated and dragged into the forest behind the facility. She was buried alive in the mud. The man holding the syringe and giving the order was none other than Dr. Thomas Lang, director of Cerberus. His voice, cold and clinical, echoed through the room. "We don't need a dog that shows mercy. We need a weapon." Olivia clenched her fists, eyes red, not just with fury but with guilt. "We treated her worse than any prisoner of war," she whispered. She looked down at Luna, curled gently at Ellie's feet, eyes full of trust. The sight made even Noah, who had never seen her eyes, speak through the lump in his throat. "I don't need to see her. I can feel it. She has a bigger heart than all of us." Just then, Henry found one final file. A data map pointing to Cerberus's central archive, a hidden vault likely containing the full records of all prototypes and evidence of their illegal cloning operations. Intelligence suggested Doctor. Lang was hiding there after purging the network of public records. The room fell into silence. The truth was too big, too heavy for a child like Ellie to fully grasp. But in her heart, something had ignited, a flame no longer fueled by fear but by purpose. She wasn't just protecting a dog. She was fighting for the last truth that still mattered in a world full of secrets: compassion. Just as Ellie's team successfully extracted classified data from Cerberus's core system and began preparing their retreat, a sharp, piercing alarm tore through the silence, like a blade through skin. Emergency red lights erupted from the cold concrete walls, flashing like constricted blood vessels, drenching the hallways in a pulsing, blood-red glow. The steel doors behind them slammed shut with a metallic roar, like the fury of a machine awakening. The hiss of locking mechanisms echoed, severing their escape. Then, through the facility's intercom, a voice rang out, chillingly familiar, now stripped of all warmth, like a death sentence. "Experiment number 01 has betrayed us. Initiate purge protocol." It was Dr. Thomas Lang. Before Ellie could scream, a cold, steel-like arm grabbed her from behind, clamping over her mouth and yanking her into a dark hallway. She struggled, wide-eyed, but in that final glance, her eyes found Luna. Their gaze locked in one silent, breathless instant. Ellie's eyes said everything. Don't become what they made you. Live by what you believe. Protect what they can't take from us. Noah cried out and tried to run after her, but Olivia held him back, signaling urgently to Luna. The stillness after the siren lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Then, from the shadows of the walls, ceiling, and concrete floor, they moved. Shapes shifted. Metal feet clanked like ticking clocks counting down. The war dogs had awakened. No longer animals, no longer companions. Cerberus had turned them into weapons. Each creature bore the scars of inhuman surgeries, gleaming steel claws, infrared scanning eyes, and grotesquely stitched backs that looked ripped straight from a nightmare lab. They were machines now, not built to love, built to kill. As Lang's voice had declared, their target was Luna. 4 of them surged forward, forming a square formation, trapping Luna in the center. A low growl rumbled from the floor. It was Rex, the strongest subject after Luna. But Rex was no longer the dog they once knew. His body was hulking with muscle, scars stretching from muzzle to neck like surgical incisions, and his eyes glowed a violent red. The others moved in unison, precise as a special forces unit. Silent, flawless. They herded Luna into a corner, sealing off every exit. But Luna didn't growl. She didn't retreat. She stepped forward, lowered her body. Ready. Not to attack, but to stand. Her eyes weren't filled with rage. There was no fire for battle, only tears, not of fear, of mourning. Luna remembered. She remembered each one of them. Their names, their first barks, their clumsy tails wag, running through the grass in Moonlight's early days, before the chips, before the knives, before the kill orders. The battle began. Rex charged at her like a steel-jacketed bullet. Luna sidestepped at the last second, slipping past his flank. No counterattack, no claws. She moved with precision, using only speed to evade. Then, in one fluid motion, she closed in behind him. No bite, no takedown, just a soft, low whimper as she pressed gently against the back of his neck, right where the neural control chip was embedded. Rex froze. His body trembled. The red light in his eyes flickered, then dimmed. And in that fragile moment, memory surged back. A little girl, pigtails swinging, once calling him Baby Rex, stroking his fur. His first bark. His first nap on a blanket. A low whine escaped him as he slowly raised his head, his eyes blinking with confusion. Behind him, the other wolves halted. Luna stepped toward them, one by one. She didn't bite. She didn't issue commands. She simply let out a deep, resonant whine from her chest. Something ancient, instinctive, like a lullaby carried through blood. Somehow it worked. One stopped. Another backed away. A third lay down. Rex turned towards the overhead speaker, blasting its command. "Terminate Subject 01, immediately." He didn't move. He didn't obey. Instead, he lifted his head and howled, a wild, primal cry that existed outside all code, a voice from the depths of a heart no machine was ever supposed to have. At that moment, Blaze burst from a side hallway, still wrapped in bandages, blood still seeping from his wounds, just in time to block a lethal strike from a Cerberus soldier lunging at Luna from behind. Olivia and the remaining agents rushed in, taking down the attacker. In the chaos, Luna looked toward the door where Ellie had been dragged away. She knew this wasn't over. But for the first time in years of silence, something had broken. The wolves, once thought soulless, had awakened, not because of programming, not because of chips, but because of something stronger than any code: trust. And in the blood-red corridor, under the flickering alarm lights, a pack of machine wolves no longer growled. They stood beside a girl, not as her soldiers, but as her allies, not because she controlled them, but because she still believed in something no algorithm could replace: a heart that could never be programmed. In the instant Luna lifted her head, ears pricked sharply at the sound of Ellie's terrified scream echoing from the cold, southern steel corridor. Something inside her ignited, not an animal instinct, but the raw, primal emotion of a mother sensing her child in danger. Without waiting for any command, Luna bolted toward the sound with terrifying speed, leaving behind Olivia's frantic call and the FBI team still locked in fierce combat in the main hallway. Blaze and Rex roared and followed because, in the hearts of these creatures once trained to be weapons, a fragment of their original selves remained: loyalty, the instinct to protect the weak, especially when that weak one was Ellie. At that moment, Ellie was trapped in a sub-level research lab, her hands bound by cut-resistant cables, her feet locked to the floor with magnetic clamps, surrounded by a haphazard setup of biometric devices installed by Cerberus's last remaining technicians. They were desperately trying to extract Luna's memories through a neural link between her and Ellie, a mysterious mental bond once observed but never understood. One technician whispered that just a few more minutes would be enough to activate the absolute control protocol, turning Luna into a soulless killing machine like the failed prototypes before her, with Ellie used as a living key to trigger the obedience mode. But they never got those few minutes. The lab door exploded without warning, steel shards flying like razors and cutting down 2 technicians instantly. Luna burst in, body scorched and blood-stained from earlier battles, her golden eyes burning with an unrelenting fury. A Cerberus soldier raised his gun, but before he could pull the trigger, Rex lunged from the side, snapping his arm and slamming him to the floor with a blood-curdling scream. Blaze threw his body into the control console, destroying the entire power system. Sparks flew, setting off small explosions around the room. Luna rushed to bite through the cables on Ellie's wrists, then gently lifted the girl with her muzzle. Ellie, still in shock, burst into tears at the sight of her 3 four-legged friends, standing like guardian spirits before her. She whispered, "Luna, you came." Olivia and the FBI team stormed in moments later, neutralizing the last Cerberus forces. But as Olivia checked the main system, her face turned pale. Bright red text flashed on the central screen. Auto-destruct initiated. 90 seconds remaining. It was Cerberus's final failsafe, programmed to ensure no data would escape. A ruthless, inhuman death sentence. No time to think. Olivia shouted, "Everyone evacuate now! Emergency exit through the lower tech bay!" She grabbed Ellie and ran. Luna, Blaze, and Rex formed a protective formation behind them, running like loyal bodyguards. The underground facility began to shake. Walls cracked open, steam pipes burst violently, and pillars of flame erupted like furious volcanoes. As they crossed the emergency tunnel just in time, a massive steel door slammed shut behind them, sealing off the wall of fire chasing after them like a beast. By the time Ellie's group emerged from the dense forest surrounding the Cerberus facility, dusk had already fallen. The last light of the day filtered weakly through the thick canopy, casting thread-like rays across dew-covered leaves. But that fragile piece shattered in an instant. The ground behind them trembled violently. A colossal explosion boomed from deep within the mountain, the shock wave rippling outward like a quake. The earth beneath them lifted, then dropped, as if yanked by an invisible force, throwing the group to the damp soil. From afar, a column of blazing red fire shot into the sky, dragging with it a black, writhing cloud, like a massive serpent swallowing the evening sky. For a moment, the entire forest fell silent. Birds scattered in frantic flocks. Leaves rained down like a storm. Ellie collapsed at the base of a tree, arms wrapped tightly around Luna's neck. Her whole body shook, not from cold, but from everything crumbling at once. The blast's pressure, the echo of near death, and the flood of uncontrollable emotion. Her tears flowed like rain, but not from fear. No, what shattered Ellie's heart was the image burned into her memory. The final moment before they escaped the blast doors, of Rex and Blaze turning back to fight, shielding them from behind. No goodbyes, no, be safe, just determined eyes, ready to sacrifice. They chose to stay behind. Ellie sobbed, clutching Luna's singed fur as if trying to hold on to what warmth remained in a world coming undone. Luna's body was covered in scrapes and scorch marks from the explosion's heat, but the wolf made no sound of pain. Instead, she lowered her head and gently licked Ellie's cheek. A soft but resolute gesture, like a wordless answer. It's over now, little one. The air still reeked of smoke and burnt metal. Ash began to fall gently like snow in the distance. Olivia approached, blood smeared across her torn sleeve, but her eyes steady. She knelt, placed a hand on Ellie's shoulder. "We're alive, and that's what they wanted," she said, voice raspy but full of resolve. "If we collapse here in grief, their sacrifice means nothing." Noah sank against another tree, head in his hands. He didn't cry, but his shoulders trembled with each breath. He'd seen Ellie taken, thought she was gone, and in the end, it wasn't weapons or strategy that brought her back. It was those beings once labeled combat tools. Now, the dark prison that had held hundreds of test subjects was gone, buried beneath the earth. No one knew if anyone survived under that ash, but everyone understood. Cerberus was over. Joseph, trailing behind the group, stopped and looked toward the smoke-choked horizon. He said nothing, only pulled from his pocket an old woven cloth embroidered with a red wolf paw and tied it to the nearest tree. A farewell mark, an ancient rite from his tribe for spirits who died fighting for freedom. "We must go on," he said, his voice softer than usual, filled with deep sorrow. "Their story can't end in rubble. Ellie, Luna, it's you two who'll carry this forward." Ellie lifted her head. Her eyes were still wet, but her gaze had changed. No more panic, no more helplessness, just a beginning, like a seed sprouting after a wildfire. She raised her hand, gently touched the fresh scar on Luna's neck, then clenched her fist. "I won't forget them," Ellie whispered, "and I won't let them be forgotten." Far in the gray sky, a flock of forest birds flew across, their wings cutting the air like blades, carrying cries that rang out like a call to a new journey. And so, amid ruin, flame, and tears, they stood up. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they knew one thing. From that day forward, they were more than survivors. They were witnesses. They were storytellers, and the last carriers of hope from Cerberus's ashes to the world beyond. Because some stories, no matter how painful, must be told, to remind us that it is not weapons, but humanity, that gives life its meaning. The alarm sirens still echoed through the night as Ellie was carried out of the research facility that had just exploded. Her face was smeared with soot and ash, but her eyes were bright, not from fear, but from a fierce determination, as if she had just emerged from the darkest chapter of her life. Luna, though limping from a minor leg injury, refused to leave Ellie's side. letting out soft whimpers as if constantly checking whether the girl was okay. As the rescue helicopters lifted the group away from that hidden location, a new chapter quietly began. Once they were secured at an FBI safe house, Agent Olivia knew time was running out. The evidence recovered from Project Moonlight, including brutal training footage, neural implant records, emotional control trials, and mass cloning data, revealed that the cruelty of Cerberus far surpassed anything she had imagined. This was no longer just an investigation. It was a responsibility to humanity and innocent beings like Luna. That evening, an emergency press conference was held at FBI headquarters, broadcast live on national television and across online platforms. The entire nation seemed to hold its breath as Olivia stepped forward, not as an agent, but as a living witness to a child's bravery and a creature's unmeasurable loyalty, long dismissed as just a pet. Olivia's voice rang strong, though it trembled slightly when speaking about Luna and Ellie. She recounted each detail, from Luna being buried alive in the mud, to their long nights of escape, to the first time she saw the barcode beneath the wet fur of a pregnant dog. She described Luna's gaze, not the eyes of an animal, but of a sentient being capable of thought, love, and sacrifice. Then came a revelation that stunned millions. Project Moonlight was one of 3 massive illegal experiments ever uncovered on U.S. soil, aimed at turning dogs into biological super soldiers remotely controlled by humans. But among all the specimens, only one, and only one, defied every scientific boundary, developing emotions, independent thought, and even compassion. Subject 01. Luna. Olivia showed a final video, where Luna, instead of fighting the other trained attack dogs as she had been conditioned to do, used memories, eye contact, and the gentle instinct of motherhood to make them stop, retreat, and eventually sit, like children suddenly remembering who they used to be. The scene left the entire room silent, the nation shaken. That very night, hashtags like #Justice for Luna, #Shut Down Cerberus, and #Protect All Lives flooded social media. People took to the streets in major states. International animal rights organizations issued formal demands to prosecute Cerberus. A wave of anger and awakening swept the country. Under immense pressure, the federal government could no longer stay silent. A statement was released from the White House just after midnight. All facilities connected to the Cerberus organization are to be immediately shut down. Senior leadership will face prosecution for crimes of biological warfare and human rights violations. One by one, the labs were sealed. Names once hidden behind multi-million-dollar contracts were arrested. The name Cerberus, once a symbol of shadow power, was officially erased from the national defense system. Elsewhere, in a small house by the woods, Ellie sat on a chair, her arm lightly bandaged, while Luna lay curled at her feet like a resting guardian. No sirens, no flashing lights, just silence, the kind that 2 small warriors had earned through blood and tears, and somewhere, within the soft light of the setting sun, came a quiet message. Not all heroes are human. After Cerberus was exposed and the entire underground network dismantled, it felt as if a veil of darkness had finally lifted from the small town. Freed from years of quiet oppression, the townspeople followed the story of young Ellie and her extraordinary dog, Luna, with awe and admiration. National newspapers and media outlets rushed to cover the tale, but for Ellie, it was never about fame or praise. What mattered most were the tiny lives growing each day under the warm roof she and her mother had built. Luna's 6 newborn pups, born amidst a storm, at a moment when life seemed to flicker like a faint spark. These 6 beings now thrived, each carrying unique traits as if gifted by a lineage beyond the ordinary. They bore not only the enhanced genes of the Moonlight Project, but also the profound love of a mother who had endured both agony and hope. Ellie named them with care and intention. Theo, brave and clever; Milo, gentle and attentive; Nova, quick-witted; Dash, spirited and loyal; Suri, affectionate and protective; and Luna Jr., a sharp-eyed mirror of her mother. Each name was more than a label. It was a promise, a new beginning. Dr. Carter, the one who saved Luna on that stormy night, took the lead in connecting with charitable organizations to find special homes for these remarkable pups, families who could offer love and purpose. On a crisp autumn afternoon, during a quiet handover ceremony, Ellie stood beside Luna, watching as each pup was embraced by kind-hearted individuals. Some were war veterans, others were children with disabilities needing a companion, and a few were therapy teachers working with autistic kids. Every meeting was its own story, the start of a chapter where healing flowed both ways. Among them, Theo, the firstborn and natural leader, became the companion of Noah, a blind boy. After months of training, Theo not only guided Noah safely, but learned to sense his emotions from his breathing and tone of voice. At their reunion, Noah smiled gently, rested a hand on Theo's head, then turned to Luna and said, "Thank you for giving birth to him. Because of him, my world is bigger than it's ever been." As for Luna, the first and only fighter created with human-like emotions, her days of battle were behind her. No longer a guardian engineered for war, she had become a symbol of love, sacrifice, and loyalty. Each day, she walked Ellie to school, curled beneath her desk during homework sessions, and listened quietly to her piano practice, ears twitching at each note, eyes glimmering with something close to a smile. Yet even in these moments of quiet peace, Ellie never forgot Agent Olivia's final warning. Cerberus doesn't just have one head. Some branches remain. She understood the journey wasn't over, that Luna's pups, these extraordinary beings, were tied to a future far larger than themselves. One chilly evening, as wind carried the scent of pine and damp earth through the woods, Ellie sat on the porch of her new home in the Wild Haven Sanctuary. Wrapped in a thick sweater, her bare hands gently stroked Luna's spine. Luna, now a fully grown and regal she-wolf, lay by her side, strong and proud. The firelight from inside cast a golden hue across Ellie's face, warming the stillness with a touch of solitude. Luna looked up at her, amber eyes silent and knowing, as if they'd long learned to speak without words. Ellie leaned in, resting her cheek against Luna's head, and whispered, "We didn't give up. And we never will. From now on, we'll protect every life like yours. And like your children's." The words were soft, but they reached deep. Memories of fleeing, fighting, losing, and surviving flickered through her like a silent reel as she closed her eyes. She remembered Rex, Blaze, and those warriors who never made it out of the Cerberus facility. She remembered every animal turned into a weapon, and the first howl that broke free, not from command, but from instinct. Now, with Luna beside her, still as a shadow of the forest, Ellie knew they hadn't just survived. They had rewritten fate. A fate no longer programmed, no longer confined to lab results or test tubes, but chosen. From deep within the forest, a low, echoing howl rang out. Ember, Luna's eldest daughter, now old enough to patrol with the other young wolves. Ellie lifted her head. Above her stretched a vast, endless sky, thousands of stars glinting like scattered diamonds, casting a soft glow over the wild, a place where secrets were buried. Blood and tears had fallen, and hope now dared to grow. And maybe, in that moment of stillness, with only the wind rustling the leaves, the world quietly acknowledged a truth. Sometimes, the purest form of humanity resides in a creature not born human, unburdened by agenda, untainted by deceit, and expecting nothing in return. Just loyalty, connection, and a love beyond words. Ellie wrapped her arms tightly around Luna's neck and whispered again, a vow not spoken to anyone but the stars. "We will be the forest's guardians, guardians of freedom, keepers of the soul humanity nearly lost." And somewhere, in the deep woods, golden eyes blinked open, listening, watching, and believing. From the final moment when dawn broke over the forest behind the small house, where Luna and her pups had peacefully returned to the wild, Ellie knew a new chapter had begun. Not just for a fourth-grade girl, but for an entire world that had been watching her. What once seemed like a story born from a strange rainstorm and a whimper in the muddy swamp had become a global symbol, filling headlines, national broadcasts, and social media feeds. Ellie's name was no longer just associated with bravery. It had come to represent unwavering compassion and the profound bond that could exist between humans and all living creatures. A formal award ceremony was held in Washington, D.C., where the President of the United States personally presented Ellie with the Golden Heart Medal, an honor rarely bestowed upon young citizens who have sparked real change in society. When Ellie stepped up to the stage in a simple white dress, her braided hair fluttering in the spring breeze, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Luna, calm and radiant, walked beside her like a loyal guardian, slowly making her way down the red carpet as millions watched through tearful eyes on live television. Yet for Ellie, this recognition was not an end. It was a promise. She never saw herself as a hero to be praised, and then forgotten. Together with her mother, Noah, and Dr. Carter, Ellie went on to establish the Moonlight Creature Rescue and Recovery Foundation, a sanctuary devoted to animals who had been experimented on, abandoned, or caught in the crossfire of biowarfare. They called it Hope Sanctuary, a place of healing, nestled in a green stretch of land on the outskirts of the city, where beings like Luna, Blaze, and their offspring could live safely, surrounded by care and love. 1 year after everything had changed, the organization founded by Rachel, Lang, and Joseph, the Bridge Sanctuary, had already welcomed over 70 special animals. Not only dogs, but cats, birds, horses, and even wild creatures that had been discarded, mistreated, or destroyed in prior experiments. This wasn't a rescue shelter or a lab. It was a shared home, a place where humans and animals coexisted as equals, loved, understood, and healed. Though only 11, Ellie continued to write handwritten thank you letters to every supporter. Her handwriting was still uneven, her grammar sometimes tangled, but every word carried a sincerity that touched everyone who received one. She guided student groups on tours through the center, telling them about Luna, about the rainy afternoon that changed everything, and about the miracles that can happen when we choose to stop and listen to a quiet cry for help. Ellie never told the story as a hero. She spoke with softness, with bright, glistening eyes and small arms wrapped around Luna as if embracing the memory of every soul that had fallen. She never claimed she had saved anyone. Instead, she'd whisper, "I think they saved me first." As for Noah, the blind boy with a sensitive heart and uncanny intuition, he had grown into one of the first developers of an animal empathy interface, a non-invasive biological system that allowed individuals with sensory or speech impairments to perceive emotional waves from animals through vibrational and sensory signals. The foundation of this technology didn't come from machines, but from the immeasurable bond between him and Luna, something science had once overlooked. Theo, one of Luna's first pups, had matured into Noah's constant companion. More than a guide dog, he became Noah's third eye, a living soul in the boy's world of darkness. People often saw Noah sitting by the lake at the sanctuary, one hand on Theo's back, the other jotting notes in a journal, recording the emotional states he heard from animals. With calm eyes, he once said, "Sometimes they speak louder than people. It's just that no one listens." After Cerberus was dismantled, the world trembled. Investigations followed, corporate sponsors were named, and once unregulated laboratories were forced to shut down. But more than anything, a warning had been etched into history. Ethics must never be sacrificed for profit. A new law, Luna's Law, was passed by Congress with overwhelming support. It banned all forms of cloning, genetic modification, training, or testing on animals for military purposes. For the first time, The U.S. legal system formally acknowledged an animal's biological rights, not as property, but as living beings. During press conferences, footage of Luna was often replayed. Head held high, calm eyes, standing next to Ellie under the ancient oak tree. No longer Specimen 01, no longer a biological weapon, but a mother, a companion, an eternal symbol. On sunny days, Ellie could often be found under that same tree, writing in her journal, reading or drawing beside Luna. Sometimes she'd lift her head and talk to the sky, as if still whispering secrets to the friends who had fallen so she could live. When asked in an interview, if you could choose again, would you do it all over? Ellie simply smiled, without hesitation, and replied, I don't think I chose. I just listened to my heart. And perhaps it was that small, trembling heart, young and unyielding, that achieved what no military system, no scientist, no million-dollar research could do. It turned a forgotten dog buried in mud into a beacon that lit the path for all of humanity. A year later, the Bridge Sanctuary was no longer just a rescue center. It had become a global symbol. Educational, medical, psychological, and biological organizations had come together to build a world where differences weren't rejected, but embraced with love. And Luna, with her sleek black coat and timeless amber eyes, now lived out her days in peace with her pups. No more gunfire, no more experiments, just the laughter of children, the rustling of leaves, and the sound of soft footsteps in harmony. As if nature itself was finally breathing a sigh of relief, humanity, at last, had learned how to love. The story of Ellie, a fourth-grade girl with a brave heart, and Luna, a dog once forgotten by the world, proves that a single act of compassion can shift the course of everything. From one cry for help in the rain to uncovering the dark truths behind Cerberus, Ellie became a symbol of hope and unconditional love. If you were in Ellie's shoes that day, would you have reached out to save that tiny life with your own hands? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected with more powerful journeys like this one. See you in the next chapter.